I'm Shawna Rosner, your host of In-House Counsel Chronicles. Today, I'm joined by Joe Schohl. Joe received a BA in finance from University of Illinois, his law degree from Columbia Law School, and an MBA from Northwestern University. Joe brings over 20 years of experience as a general counsel in the highly regulated healthcare space, including for a Fortune 500 company and various private equity-backed entities. Joe founded a law firm that provides strategic legal advice to healthcare companies. And more recently, he founded and heads a training and development community tailored for inside counsel. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Great, Shawna. It's great to be here. I'm a listener to your podcast, and so I appreciate having the opportunity to be a guest.
So glad to have you and can't wait for our conversation. I want to start off by talking about how I know you had a goal to become a general counsel at the ripe age of 40, and you achieved that goal before 40. Why did you have this ambition to start with?
Yeah, right. I had the goal from like when I was in law school. When I was I was going through law school and I had done a first year internship and I had done corporate law in that. I found that that's what I wanted to do. And I also found that working with the in-house lawyers was one of the best parts of being an outside lawyer. And so I knew pretty early on that eventually I wanted to make the transition inside once I had the appropriate training as an outside counsel.
And how old were you when that occurred?
So this was in my mid-20s, and I always say I wrote it on a piece of paper that I wanted to be a general counsel. And I remember when I took my first in-house job, I had lunch with the managing partner of the firm that I was leaving to go do that. And I said that I had this goal to be general counsel of a publicly traded healthcare company before I'm 40. And at that time I was 30, maybe 30. And he kind of chuckled, right? Because that's a very narrow target. And it wasn't about, for me, it wasn't about like, is exactly that going to happen? But is something close, right? Maybe it's not publicly traded, maybe it's not healthcare, blah, blah, blah. And so I went to a healthcare company, but I was like corporate counsel, sector 3, right? I joke about that, but it was literally like corporate counsel 3. And there were a couple levels above that before you get to senior counsel or assistant general counsel. I mean, it was a long road. It was a big company.
Yeah. Baxter, correct?
It was Baxter, right? Yeah, great training ground. I think we had 7 people who were part of that law department who went on to be general counsels of publicly traded companies, which was kind of neat. So it was great training ground in the way that it was structured and the opportunities that you got. And so next thing you know, I was there 6 years and I made sure that I rotated around. So I was less concerned about promotions as I was about opportunities to do new things and support new areas. So I started in the corporate secretary group because I had been an M&A and securities lawyer. Then I rotated to an operations support position where I actually had to leave the company headquarters and go to one of the satellite offices and support that group. But I was their GC, it was one of the smallest divisions in the company, but for all intents and purposes, I got to be the GC of that business unit. And then I rotated through an M&A transaction spot. And next thing you know, I get a call about a public company healthcare GC job. And I interview for it. And each successive interview, I'm thinking at first, I thought, well, I've got about a 5% chance of getting this job because I'm not even reporting to the general counsel at Baxter at this point. But as I met more people there, I'd come home and I'd be like, well, maybe I have a 25% chance. Next thing you know, I'm like, I think I'm going to get it. And I did get an offer and I did take it and I was 36.
Wow. And what company was that again?
That was DaVita.
Okay.
Another healthcare services company. Yeah.
And you shared with me an article you wrote about the 7 steps to becoming a general counsel. Can you share with us those steps?
Yeah, I can. It sounds technical, but I say it's not how to be a general counsel. It's 7 things I did to become a general counsel. And I remind people right at the beginning, like this is not the way, it's a way. It's a way that worked for me, but everybody's journey is different. And so the 7 steps that I outlined in that article were: have a clear vision for what you want, right? And that's what we just talked about. 2, make sure your experience is well-rounded. We talked about that as well, and rotating around the inside positions. 3, develop your business acumen. I did that through a combination of supporting the business unit, with a P&L and having to be accountable for business results, but also I got an MBA. So I was going to school at night during this time that I was at Baxter and getting an MBA, which is not necessary, but was certainly a great way to accelerate my learning and understanding. And I especially liked that I did it while I was working. So I would learn things on a Tuesday night, and Wednesday morning, I'd be in the management team meeting talking about everybody else's area. I'm sure people love that, right? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? But it was like I had a real life like laboratory to apply and ask questions about the things that I was learning in a way that wouldn't have been the same had I done like a JD MBA. Right? So, okay. Number 4, spend time doing deep work. Before it was called deep work, before Cal Newport wrote his great book on the topic, I called it any number of things, but it was like quiet time where you're not back then it was like you're not in meetings and you've got time blocked to get the work done, because you spend all day in meetings and then you've got all this work to do. What are you going to do? Do it in the evening? Like, I was going to school at night. I had 2 kids. I had to be efficient. And so for me, that meant before the day got crazy to block time to get work done. Number 5, have a growth mindset. So being an in-house lawyer, we're dealing with problems for the most part, right? Like usually when things have gone wrong, hopefully we're spending time doing things proactively to keep them from going wrong. But a lot of times we're dealing with problems, and that can lead you to get into this cynical, kind of negative headspace if you're not conscious about it, and viewing these challenges when they arrive at your desk as, hey, this is, even if I don't know how to solve this now, by the time we're done, I will, and that'll add to my personal capabilities and the capabilities of our legal team. So having that growth mindset was something not necessarily natural to me, but something that I developed over time. Again, it wasn't called a growth mindset at that time. It was just like staying positive, And then 6 was seeking intrinsic rather than extrinsic rewards. So for me, what that meant was not depending on other people to tell you you're doing a great job or give you bonuses and raises, etc. To know that the work itself is a reward because it's making you better and more capable. You have to solve little problems before they'll give you big problems to solve. So as you're moving up that competence curve, your competence is growing. And then eventually that's going to really, really pay off. So not being too worried about like year-to-year bonuses or compensation. Maybe the division had a bad year, not complaining about that, knowing that you're still getting opportunities to learn and grow is enough. And then 7 was choose great mentors and learn from them, which I am blessed to have had, great people all along the way, men and women who, I feel like really, I'm very grateful to them for helping me along the way.
Well, I think that's a really great list, and it obviously worked for you, but totally agree with you. Everyone's might be a little bit different of a path, but I think our listeners here who aspire to go in-house can learn something from all 7 of those steps you shared. So thank you.
Yeah, the in-house role is a great one because you really get an opportunity to add breadth to your depth. So when you're at a law firm lawyer, and today more than ever, it's very specialized, right? And there are benefits to that. And some people would prefer that, to be so good at, fewer things that they can just come in and add a tremendous amount of value because they know that area. If it's outside their area, then they don't know, but they can get one of their partners involved, etc. I always wanted to know something about everything, even though you can't, and you have to when you're a general counsel, even though you can't be an expert in most things, you do learn how to get up to speed, what I call being a super learner, and get up to speed quickly in an area of somebody else's expertise. And so I consider it the best lawyering job.
That's great. And I know you've been in-house at both public and private companies. I want to ask you what the biggest difference in your practice or challenge you face when you moved from a public company to a private one.
Yeah, and when I was GC of the public company, it was different than when I was at lower levels, because so much of your job becomes board meetings, governance, and quarterly earnings call prep, and things like that. So I used to say, it just seems like, didn't we just do this, yesterday, 3 months ago? Those things were sort of coming constantly. And when I would look at my calendar at the beginning of the year, my assistant pointed this out one time. She said, you really only have, X number of days that aren't already accounted for, and this was at the start of the year, right? With just board meetings, management team meetings, et cetera. You block those out and then you see what's left. It was like half the days were already taken, which certainly you have some of those in the private company context, but not as many.
Sure. And I want to segue into leadership and what you think makes for a good in-house counsel leader.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be somebody who, well, probably let me take management for a second. First of all, like managing people. I think one of the most important things, and the thing I would try to remind myself of, was everybody's different. And so you've got to manage everybody differently depending on, where they are on their career path. Are they, new to in-house? Are they experienced? Are they somewhere in between? Number two, where they are on their sort of motivation. Are they looking to become the GC, and so they just want, every opportunity to gobble things up? Or are they pretty content in the position they're in which case you're trying to get the most out of them and the most experience, et cetera? And then third is, like, what are their life circumstances? What's the context in which they're showing up to work each day? Like, I know on my own path, there were times where I was more or less, I have 4 kids. So, like, did I just have a new kid? Like, am I up late at night, et cetera, et cetera? Or am I in a period where I was balancing school, family, and work? Or was I in a period where I could just sort of go all out? So knowing and understanding that, and then adjusting how directive you are, and then how supportive you are. And I don't see the two as counters to each other. You can be highly directive and highly supportive, or you can be a little of each. For somebody who's been around and they don't necessarily need it, they just need to do their job and have you help clear hurdles when they arise. And then there's the people who are in between. Some need, more direction, some need less, and some need more support, and some need less.
Yeah,
So
so
I
it's
think about it from a management perspective. And then, from a leadership perspective, it's having, if you're the GC, or even, leading a team at any level within a legal department, it's your job to know where you're headed as a team, knowing what you have to accomplish, making sure that's well articulated to the team, that everybody's moving in the same direction, you've got clear priorities, et cetera. All of that, sort of vision and leadership is also so critical.
sure. And how would you say you navigate the leadership you just talked about? Obviously, it depends on different factors, but what about if you're working during uncertain times?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like right now,
Perhaps.
right? Or during COVID. I mean,
Right, right, right.
yeah, no, it's a great question. I haven't really thought about that in any kind of systematic way, but let me take, like, COVID, for example, where every day things were changing, and there were, you know, if you're operating in different jurisdictions, there were things you had to do in one place to be compliant and things you couldn't do in another place, and they were the same thing, right? So what you had to do in one place could get you in trouble in another. And I mean, it's kind of like that now in some ways in the current political climate. And I would say that, one of the keys to moving through that was to sort of put my personal preferences about how I think the world should work aside, because nobody cares. Like, the world is the reality, and I've got to adjust to the reality and be effective within that reality. That's what my employer's paying me to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and good advice. I think we'll always face some uncertainty during tenure in-house. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it can be at the big, like, geopolitical level, like we talked about, or it can just be a new management team coming in, or changes within the company. And I think part of being a good executive, is to be adaptable and flexible, and to not get cynical.
Sure. And I wanted to talking about change. AI, has come to fruition, and we've seen it more and more, and it's here to stay. So what do you think in terms of AI, and how in-house counsel can showcase value in the face of AI advancement?
Yeah, I mean, I most recently was general counsel at a radiology company, and radiology is at the forefront of AI. And so it's something we'd been talking about for a long time, even before I had ever heard of ChatGPT, right? Because image recognition is kind of at the, 6, 7, 8 years ago, was kind of at the forefront. And the leader of our AI program there, Dr. Nina Kotler, would often say that it's not going to replace radiologists, AI, but radiologists who use AI are going to replace radiologists who don't. And I remember that stuck with me. And now I hear that, more often for lots of jobs, including, and I definitely think it's true, because we can't ignore the benefits of AI. I hardly Google anything anymore, because you just get a bunch of random stuff you have to sift through. Whereas with ChatGPT, it's like curated and you can talk to it. It's helpful in so many areas of our lives. Of course, like synthesizing through for legal information is no different. Now, just like in other areas of our lives, like when you get the information, you've got to determine, is this accurate? Is it relevant? How does it apply to my situation? It's no different on the legal side, but it can at least get you started and give you a shortcut. It's nowhere near where it's going to replace the kind of analytical thinking that we do and translating that into real world actions, but it's a great tool. It's a great tool. And I think it's important to learn how to use it. And I've got to think that that's going to be a big, is like, right now it feels a lot like people are just figuring it out on their own. And wouldn't it be so much better if there were, like, well thought out training programs for people for different use cases in their area? That's not so much ad hoc. I mean, a lot of us are doing that, but like, shouldn't organizations provide that for their teams, so that people are, it's sort of, you go from, like, for a while there, it was like, oh, we have to adopt a policy about whether people can use it or not. Like, people are using it. Maybe we should be spending as much time thinking about developing a training program for people on how to use it most effectively.
I agree with you. And I know training is something that you have as part of your current everyday. You're doing training now for in-house counsel, in addition to a law firm that you founded. Tell us a little bit about what you do now every day.
Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, we just launched Insight Counsel Academy at the beginning of this year. It's something that I've been working on for over a year and something I've been thinking about for probably 10 years. And the reason I was thinking about it was because when, pre-COVID, we were doing annual retreats, right? Whether it was in my law firm, whether it was in the legal departments that I was running, et cetera. And we're getting back to that now, but there was a period where we weren't doing as much, but we were doing annual retreats. And like when I would be leading a legal team, I would often notice that a lot of the people on the team, while they had great training as lawyers, had never been exposed to, the ideas of like Stephen Covey and Peter Drucker, how to be effective executives. And so I would bring in outside training and development program people, to facilitate that, to sort of get the team up to speed on the basic fundamentals and building blocks. And then when that was happening, as the GC, I would be a very active participant because, the leader would be of the program would be talking about something, and then I would say, okay, guys, for us in our world, that means that looks like this. And so what the idea behind Inside Counsel Academy is to take a lot of those ideas about how to be effective and tailor it specifically to inside counsel. Right. And so we go through how to be personally effective and how to be effective within your organization, specifically as an in-house lawyer. And that could be anybody from new to in-house to, an experienced GC. Everything in between. That's how the program's designed. We offer it in two different formats. One is an in-person workshop, like the kind that was talking about a minute ago, where it's like off-site with your team. You want to provide, you're a general counsel or a deputy or assistant general counsel who has a team under them, and you want to provide turnkey professional development to help level up everybody's skills. The other way that we offer it is in a community group. You go through the program with a cohort on Zoom in a small group environment with me leading it and people who are sort of similarly situated in their career path. We did our first workshop at the beginning of February, and we're a little over halfway through our first community group. Now, I'm going to do one more community group in late April, May. It's a month-long program, and then launch them. These are sort of we're at the testing stage, smaller groups, and then in the fall, really open it up more broadly.
That's amazing. I think that you really tapped into a need there. And I wish you all the success. I know that if any of our listeners are interested, they'll be able to reach out to you and you'll be able to get them more information. And
100%. Anybody listening to your show who reaches out to me, I'm happy to get on the phone, talk through whether or not they're right for the academy or whether they just want some, career advice, whatever. If people tell me they heard us having this conversation, I'll make the time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I hope people will take you up on that offer. If you were able to go back in time and give yourself advice as an attorney who just passed the bar, what would that be?
Yeah, great question. I would say, like, literally, if it were giving myself advice, I would say it's okay to slow down a little bit. Take your time, because there'll be plenty of opportunities along the way. And, I've come to realize that earlier on, I was not more ambitious, but maybe less patient than I would be. And then I, certainly am, hopefully now. If I were giving sort of general advice, and I have a daughter who is a third-year associate at Reed Smith in Dallas, And she's so far ahead of where I was when I was a third year associate. But, my advice to her was look for an opportunity where you're going to be busy and with people who are willing to mentor you and train you. And she certainly has found that, certainly on the second front, especially on the first front, because she's working all the time.
Yeah. It's really good advice. And I always like to end the podcast by asking my guests what tip they can share with attorneys who aspire to become in-house counsel. Now, I know you have a lot of tips, but what one would you want to share with our listeners today?
Yeah. Okay. So first, let me add one thing on the advice side, because I think this is like relevant now, is I would really recommend that people look for an opportunity, especially in their first few years, to work with a group that's in person. So most of the day now I'm on Zoom with people, but had that been earlier in my career, I think that would have been it would have stunted my growth a little bit. So there's a lot that happens when you're in an in-person environment, that a lot of good happens. Okay. So then for people who want to move in-house, I think that, there's an old book, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. I would make sure that I was building relationships, if that's eventually what I wanted to do, that were going to be important to me at the time when the time comes to do it. And that includes building relationships with people who work in-house, so you know what you're getting into, and building relationships with recruiters who can help you get that job when the time is right and can tell you ahead of time, here's what I look for when I'm looking for placements, in-house placements, so that you can make sure you're doing those things. So when the time comes, you present yourself as a candidate who's checked all the boxes.
Great advice. I mean, I don't have anything more to say. Of course.
Somebody like Shawna.
Right. Thank you. No, this was really a wonderful discussion today. I learned a lot, and I know our listeners will too. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Joe.
Thank you, Shawna, for having me.
Absolutely.